presentation topic is the legal vending of organs from the four lenses. To begin with a quote from Tracy Gonzalez-Pedron in 2013, out of the 127,000 patients this year exclusively who need organs, only about 14,000 will accurately receive them. That's about 11% overall.
This leads to the question, should the United States legalize the non-vital organ market?
So here's some background on organ donation. First off, in 1954 was the first successful organ transplant. This kick-started the entire question. In 1977, the United Network for Organ Sharing, or UNOS, was established. This allowed doctors and patients to connect across the country. In 1984, cyclosporin was used as a method to prevent rejection of transplanted organs. This was the first case of a drug being used that could actually help people in organ transplants. In 1987, UNOS starts recording donation data, which allowed even more successful organ transplants.
And furthermore, when we look at it politically on a historical timeline, in 1968, the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act prevented people from under the age of 18 from donating organs, and also allowed people to be biased on who gets organs first. In 1984, the National Transplant Act prevented people from actually selling organs across the entire national state. In 1986, the United Network of Organ Sharing allowed better allocation, which means better transfer from within states and within other boundaries, such as districts. In 1999, the Institute of Medicine report stated that the waiting times were too long for both recipients and for donors, and therefore that people would need to decrease the waiting time. Furthermore, the alternatives that we're proposing are the gift model, the promise model, and the consent model. The gift model is where one person would donate their organ in exchange for another gift, in exchange for another person's organ. The promise model would be where I promise to give my organ after I die, after I have become deceased, and another person would be able to take it. The consent model is the opposite, is where I'm living and I'm able to donate my organ with my own consent while I'm still alive. So the most viable option would be a promise acceptance model, which is part of a promise and consent model, where I can give up my organs post-death or I can give up my organs after death.
And so, beginning with not only the models, an open market, so how the organs would be sold. So there will be three main effects to the current issues with organs, and that's a market would increase supply due to a financial incentive to those who may not already donate their organs. And with that increased supply would become a decreased cost because there will be more organs in the system and they will be less rare and less expensive for those reasons. And from that decreased cost, along with the increased supply still existing, an increased survival rate with more organs to solve the problem would be there, as well as with the decreased cost, more accessibility to those organs would exist. And to begin, here's a graph. P2 represents the current illegal organ market price as accurate as possible. And P1 is where a legal organ market price would be. Now D here, the D line coming down is demand. Now that's how many people need organs right now. As Q1 is where it is currently, and as you can see the line here, S is supply. Now as S goes up due to the price coming along, is demand will decrease significantly, meaning there will be more and more people who will be able to get these organs for their livelihoods. And more and more people will be able to sell their organs as well to help themselves. And coming across here is the effects of technology.
So, the effects of technology on the actual organ market transplant, not the organ market surgery itself, the success rates would increase drastically if there were to be more transplants and more money going into them, which we'll talk about later. So surgeries would become safer, success rates would increase, and there would be more surgeries. But the main problem here is the more need for organs. So this graph, it puts into perspective how many people are waiting and how many are giving and how many are getting. So this little chunk here, the orange or the purple and the green, are how many are actually giving organs. The dead donors outnumber the living donors, but the recipients are still drastically smaller than the waiting. What this means that the problem is not the technology, it's how many organs are available, which is why we come to the conclusion that
the best possible solution is the one that we choose for multiple reasons. It's going to benefit the upper class, the middle and upper class of America. First off, it allows them to buy an organ. Obviously, if they need an organ, instead of waiting on a list and maybe, but probably not getting access to one, they can now guarantee themselves one by paying for it with cash. Secondly, it financially benefits both parties. the buying party and the selling party. The selling party obviously gives some of their personal capital to get a lot of money, and the buying party saves costs in medical costs because they only need to pay for surgery, not for the years of hospitalization, dialysis, and the like. It also has benefits to the medical world. Obviously, the medical world is all about saving lives. As Cho just said, a lot of people are not getting organs and dying. Having this market where people have a guaranteed right to an organ, they will be able to live. Also, it reduces the burden on our medical system. Less people are going to be waiting, if not months, years in hospitals. There's going to be less red tape from hospitals operating on government costs.
Furthermore, we can address this on a state and national level. On a state level, there is the organ procedure process, the OPP, which allows states to donate within their borders. However, the state would need to be able to address things outside of states, so as Illinois being able to donate organs to Ohio, per se. Furthermore, there should be the gift law enforcement where people are still able to give their organs and receive organs. It's throughout the states, it's a very one-sided system where one party gives up an organ in order for little to no gain. Within the national level, we should apply presumed consent laws. In the 1980s, there was presumed consent laws where where doctors took an organ's body with the idea of presumed consent. However, the families were complaining that their loved ones were losing their capital per se. And we also need to remove the social worth factor. It's been noted that people who are well-educated, people who are of color, and people who are younger typically get organs faster than those who aren't. Therefore, we need to be able to remove the social worth factor, so in order for people, regardless of age, gender, or sexuality, can receive one.
Now, there are limitations and implications to our solution. The first one starts with exploitation of the lower classes. First problem is that it's going to become a forced decision. The lower classes, they can really use and really need the cash, which can be multiple thousands of dollars, if not more. This will result to a societal shift where it will become expected of them to sell their organs, which everyone has, and everyone has more than one they can sell, to get that money. So rather than being a choice that they may or may not use, it will become normal for everyone to do it, and that will become an exploitation of their market. Also, the market will turn predatory, like many other markets have turned predatory towards lower classes. On the other hand, people that will function as brokers for these organs, they will be making a lot of money and exploiting both the rich and the poor. The poor, for example, can sell an organ for $5,000 to a broker. The broker will turn right around and sell it for $150,000, collecting the difference. Also, we need regulation and safety. It is estimated that nowadays 1 in 5 transplanted organs come from illegal sources. That's 20%. We will need to somehow stop that illegal trade, even if we do implement this legal trade in the U.S. Also, we need a quality control system. How do you know whose organs are better than others? How do you know if they are sick or if they will be rejected or not? Also, there will be a lot more red tape now because instead of just having everyone on a national register, we have to make sure there's no exploitation, no bribery, and nothing illegal happening on it, which will slow down the process even slower than it is right now.
And then let's couple it with adapting and modifying the current legislation. The Final Rule Act prevents people from selling their organs under the age of 18. Furthermore, it would be better if we could modify this for allowing children to give up organs for other children in order for there to be a better success rate for people of all ages. Furthermore, there's a first-party consent which forces people to actually apply and dictate that they are going to be giving up their organs. We need to be able to modify that to have presumed consent so that way there can be more organs even post after death. However, our group does state and mention that there is a potential for this to be abused, but this would need further regulation. Furthermore, we need to open up donor type limitations. There are limitations on people of color, people of different sexualities, and in fact there's different limitations on certain types of races. All these combined together need to be opened up so we can have more people from different races donating to other types of people. Furthermore, opening up different donor types will allow more types of recipients to have it. Also, there should be economic and social regulations. As both Cho and Ivan have stated, there should be an economic regulation where people aren't able to abuse the system and people are able to allow for better class freedom.
So a final decision as to should the United States legalize a non-vital organ market is yes, with a caveat. Assuming previously mentioned regulations and limited control of the market by the government to ensure that all conduct is preferred is necessary for this market to succeed in the way that it needs to be. And with that come our sources.
All right, Ivan.
Yep.
Describe how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of group discussion.
A group discussion, did you say?
Yep.
At the very beginning, we thought that we would be very, very split on the issue and possibly saying no, because we did realize that from the get-go there were a lot of limitations, a lot of implications, and a lot of possible issues with our problem. We addressed some of them towards the end of our presentation. While we were discussing, though, we realized that it was very much split 2 and 2 rather than what we thought would be a 3-1 or 4-0 against the idea of legalizing the organ markets. This was helped a lot by the ethical lens, which I happen to have. We thought that the ethics would be absolutely against it because we already knew reasons such as the lower class exploitation. We weren't aware that there would be pro-ethical reasons supported by experts in the field, and that greatly shifted what we thought we were going to end up with as a decision to what we ended up going with.
Okay, Richard. Richard, so how did the group decide to include Dan's perspective into the overall presentation?
So for Dan's perspective, the economic perspective was closely tied to how people would be able to receive organs based on today's model and compared to the model that we're proposing. We already know that there's a high cost relation based on how to receive an organ from out of state or out of country. Then we coupled it with research based on how current legislation could be modified for lower costs. We were able to determine that a system that allows for better regulation and for better financial regulation would allow for lower and cheaper costs.
Dan, give one way that your thinking changed as a result of Ivan's findings.
So my initial idea was very positive towards the solution, beginning with simply that, yes, some regulations would be necessary, but nothing too major. And my research did have a small hole that I had not realized beforehand, which was that there was a lower class exploitation that would be much more major than what I had previously predicted. And so in that, my research saw that how the financially lower class would need that more, and the desperation would lead to possibly positives in what I would see in how more supply and less demand, but I did not see how ethically that more supply and less demand may be negative towards our final point.
And last but not least, describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that made you think differently about your solution or conclusion.
So I'm going back to Ivan's point, is the predatory markets. That really shifted the focus because my lens was technological, and the main issue with mine was that there wasn't enough organs in circulation to have enough transplants to save enough lives. So I thought the easy solution was just add more organs to the market, but as Ivan said, it could start making a predatory market in favor or wealthy people over the general population, which is not as well off.